Imagine that a devastating flood strikes a district. There are two officers who could be posted during this situation. The first officer is one who immediately starts issuing orders. Every decision is legally correct, every procedure is being followed, but they ignore the fear of the affected families, the anxiety of the other officers, and the emotions of the people around them. While the second officer is also equally competent, they too act swiftly, but along with giving instructions, they ensure that their team remains calm. They reassure the affected families and listen patiently while taking decisions that are both efficient and humane. Let me ask you something. Which officer would you trust more? Or which officer would you prefer? I hope you chose the second one. Because while the first officer demonstrates what we traditionally call IQ, the intelligence quotient, the second officer demonstrates both IQ and EQ, the emotional quotient. That brings me to today's Thoughtful Thursdays topic, emotional intelligence, and why it is relevant not only for our GS paper 4 but also for civil administration. Before we understand emotional intelligence, I think it's worth asking one simple question. Why did psychologists even feel the need to develop such a concept? For much of the 20th century, intelligence was largely understood as our cognitive ability, our capacity to reason, solve problems, learn, and think logically. And this came to be measured through what we now call the intelligence quotient or IQ. But over time, psychologists noticed something interesting. Two students with similar IQs often performed very differently in life. Two managers with similar qualification became two different kind of leaders. And two officers with equal knowledge inspired very different levels of public trust. Clearly, IQ wasn't explaining the whole picture. There seemed to be other dimensions of human intelligence, one that went beyond cognition. Interestingly, psychologists since then have proposed different ways to understand intelligence. Besides cognitive intelligence, there is social intelligence, linguistic and musical intelligence. There is Howard Gardner's idea of multiple intelligences. And among these different understandings, one concept that has gained enormous traction, especially in the field of leadership and administration, is emotional intelligence. This concept was first formally introduced in 1990 by psychologists Peter Salovey and John Mayer. A few years later, psychologist Daniel Goleman popularized this through his best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence, bringing the idea into classrooms, boardrooms, and public administration across the world. So, what is emotional intelligence? Simply put, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and appropriately use our own emotions while also understanding and responding effectively to the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence actually isn't about being emotional, it's about being intelligent with those emotions. According to Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence has five major components: self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. According to him, these qualities together make us not only better professionals but also better leaders. Now, although emotional intelligence is a modern psychological concept, many philosophers have already emphasized these qualities centuries ago. It may be Aristotle, who spoke about phronesis or practical wisdom and believed that virtues such as self control and good judgment must be cultivated through practice. It may be Lord Buddha, who emphasized on mindfulness, compassion, and equanimity, qualities which closely resemble Goleman's self awareness, empathy, and emotional regulation. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, also reminded us that while we cannot control external events, we sure can control our own response to them. Once again, reflecting the self awareness and self regulation principles of Daniel Goleman. Perhaps modern psychology has simply given a scientific framework to the qualities that philosophers have been encouraging humanity to cultivate for centuries. Let's now discuss emotional intelligence in public administration with an example. Suppose a poor farmer unknowingly submits incomplete documents for a welfare scheme. A rigid officer may simply reject the application, whereas an emotionally intelligent officer, however, would exercise empathy and practical judgment without violating the rules. They would guide the farmer to complete their documentation while ensuring due process is followed. Notice the law remains the same. The difference lies in how the officer deals with the people. This is emotional intelligence. UPSC also has repeatedly asked questions on emotional intelligence in GS paper 4, not merely asking us to define it, but asking how emotional intelligence can improve governance and administration. That tells us something important. UPSC is not asking us to become psychologists. It is asking us to be administrators who understand people and situations, be it while answering topics like police reforms or disaster management or case studies on leadership in corporate and government spheres. However, like every concept, emotional intelligence too has its own limitations. Some psychologists argue that it is difficult to measure emotional quotient objectively. Others believe that its definition sometimes overlaps with personality traits. And lastly, just possessing emotional intelligence does not automatically guarantee ethical behavior from individuals. Nevertheless, most scholars agree that emotional intelligence remains one of the most valuable qualities needed for leadership, teamwork, and public service. And that's why emotional intelligence continues to remain relevant not just in our UPSC syllabus but in public life as well. Because perhaps it would be our IQs that help us enter the civil service, but it will be our emotional intelligence that will help us truly serve in the civil services. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed today's discussion, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, one more attempt, one day at a time, and I'll see you in the next video.